Hey, and good day. I'm really super excited to have my good friend, Zach Rance, with us today. We've become familiar with one another. We work out at the Lifetime Fitness here locally, and I've just really been inspired by the energy he brings to life, the enthusiasm, the openness. And as we got to know one another better, I also learned that Zach is also a coach, does some great work in the lines of health and wellness and mindset. He's certified as a life coach and a nutrition coach. And he's also written this really great direct book called Live Better Now. And the subtitle is A Guaranteed Way for Millennials and Gen Z to Live a Healthier and Happier Life. In case you missed, I just missed that time zone, but I thought the book was great anyway, and I'm excited to have him here. So anyway, welcome, Zach. It's great to have you. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me, John. And, you really stuck out like a sore thumb at the gym, dude. You are shredded, in crazy good shape, and doing some yoga in the floor of the gym, and we had some really good conversations. I was glad that we were able to connect on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. And as I shared with you, this being the Prism of Perspective, what we're really doing in this podcast is looking at how do the filters of our beliefs, our energy, and our presence impact the way that we experience life. And so what we are going to be doing is really looking at your life and thinking about how are the ways that either subconsciously, unconsciously, or consciously you've engaged these filters for better or worse to create the outcomes, to make the pivots that you've had in your life to really create what you now are experiencing.
Absolutely.
So when we were chatting in the gym, you had said that, that you've kind of always had a certain level of confidence and boldness. And tell me a little bit about how you think that came about. Like looking back, is there anything in particular, the way your parents were engaging you or the freedom you had? What do you think was really going on there?
That's a great question. I have always been very bold and very confident. And I really don't know where it came from. It's not like my parents instilled confidence in me. They didn't teach me what confidence was. I've always just been shooting my shots, whether it was with girls on the playground or, I also think actually I excelled really well in school and I always got very good grades and it just came easy to me. Mm-hmm. I was always the first one done with my test and I usually got the best score. And I never really tried super hard to do better than anyone else. It kind of just came natural. And I guess that's just God's gift to me is that I was very sharp from an early age. And because I had so much success scholastically, kindergarten, for example, quick story in kindergarten, we're all sitting in a circle, who wants to read? And most of the class did not know how to read at 5 years old, but I quickly stood up, raised my hand, and I read the entire book. Yeah. And every single time we got in a circle, Mrs. Dinsmore, shout out Mrs. Dinsmore, would say, who wants to read? And I would raise my hand immediately. So, and I think that early success just helped me continue to be intentional about whether it was school or sports or friends, just keep trying. And I also wasn't ever afraid to fail. I kind of luckily looked at failure as a good thing. It's okay, it didn't work out. Let's try something else. I wasn't ever scared to fail and failure never kind of discouraged me in any way.
Right. So let's kind of look at the filters for a second and think about, okay, if we look at beliefs, the way I've designed it is, I look at, you have your identity beliefs, which include your purpose, your vision, and your values. And then you have what I call the global beliefs, right? Which are, do you believe in a safe or a dangerous world? Do you believe in scarcity or abundance? And do you believe that everything is dynamic and you continue to grow in your abilities, or are you kind of a fixed unit? And what I heard you saying is that immediately you had a perception of yourself, that you were capable. And I also heard you saying that you got great feedback, so it felt as if it was a safe world, right? You didn't get beaten down, right? You got good feedback. Exactly. And so what happens a lot of times is we spiral up or down based on what we're receiving and then also the story we tell ourselves about what we're receiving. How does that play into your thinking about your own development there?
Interesting. Yeah, I think it was just the feedback I was getting, like you said, mixed with my innate belief that I'm going to be successful, that I'm going to get it done. And when I say success, I don't mean business success or athleticism success, but just being happy, having good relationships, and staying on top of the ball.
You mean just the shit that really matters?
Exactly. just the shit that really matters. So I think it was a mixture of both.
Well, that's great. And when you look at your life, right? So you did well in school, you continued to go do well in school. And you also told me and shared with me that right before you were getting ready to go off college. So we just jumped immediately from kindergarten to college, right? So there was some academic success in there, some winning of girls on the playground, a lot of different experiences like that. And then all of a sudden you're getting ready to go to college let's shout out to the Gators, who are both Gators also. Right before you're getting ready to go to college, there's a big twist in your family experience. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, it was 2008. And I remember the night my mom was sitting on the stairs crying because we had no money. And I started working when I was 15, and at this point I was 18. So I always kind of like made my own money, and I would use it on video games or new shoes or things like that. But it was 2008, and the year before I went to college, I graduated in 2009. And I also had a little brother who is now 5 years old. My parents ended up having another child 13 years after they had me, and he was not a mistake. He was a blessing in disguise. Okay, but 2008, my mom's crying on the stairs. We don't have any money. Saying we're gonna lose our house. I remember exactly where I was, and I didn't really say anything. I obviously did not interject into the conversation, but that made a huge lasting impact on my mindset. That's when I kind of realized that, hey, I have to be independent financially. And from that point on, I made a pretty strong pivot towards keeping all my money towards my chest. And I was going to school, and the day I got to college, my mom gave me a $50 gift card to Publix, which is the grocery store here down in South Florida. And instead of buying books, instead of making friends, I immediately looked for a job because, even though I was getting a Pell Grant and I was getting student loans and things like that, I knew that I needed some income coming in. And that was a huge, huge factor in who I am today. I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder going into college because at University of Florida, obviously it's a great school. And a lot of the people that I surrounded myself with in my fraternity or just guys that I met, seemed to be well off. They come to school in BMWs and their parents are paying for their rent. Their parents are paying for their food, and I didn't have that extra support. Right. And believe it or not, I think we can all understand that was actually very helpful and advantageous to me because I was good at saving my money. But that was a pivotal point in my life that shifted my perspective. Yeah. And
So this one of the things I think I really want people to understand about perspective and beliefs is like stuff happens to us. There was an opportunity for you to have taken that a totally different place, right? So your mom's crying on the stairs. You got a 5-year-old brother. You're getting ready to go off to school where there's a lot of affluence, and you could have absorbed that as, why me? Like, how come this is happening to me? This isn't really fair. But instead, you chose to say, okay, I'm going to accept personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to look at this as an opportunity to begin to build my future. And so do you remember any moments of slipping the other direction, or did you just bounce completely?
No, there were definitely a lot of moments of slipping in the other direction. And it wasn't just 100% conviction of like, I'm going to be financially independent. I'm going to take the bull by the horns. There was a lot of why me questions as well. Mm-hmm. It was definitely a mixture of both because, I definitely did feel sorry for myself for sure. Mm-hmm. But there was no other option. It was either, get a job and make money so I can stay in school or not have any money to buy food. So, I feel like when we have pressure and when our backs are against the wall, I forgot what law it is. It's like Maslow's law or Perkins' law. I don't know what it is, but it's like when we're under pressure, when we have a deadline, right. Hey, you got to get this done by 6 p.m. Yeah. Then we get it done by 6 p.m. But if you have until next Tuesday to get it done, you'll wait till next Tuesday to get it done type of thing.
I think you're referencing what is called Parkinson's law, right?
Thank you.
Parkinson's law actually is a physics law that says that gas will expand to fill up the space of the volume provided. And it comes to work in our lives that, if I say, hey, I need this by next Tuesday, Monday night, you're up late doing the work, exactly. Right? Exactly. But if I told you I needed it tomorrow, you're up late tonight getting the work done. And so, when you found yourself with that both economic and time pressure, because in college, if you don't have demands on you. A lot of kids struggle because there's too much time, right? Parkinson's law almost works against them because all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm taking 15 hours a week of school. And let's say I got another, even if it's 30 hours a week of studying, which is really more than most do, that's 45 out of 168 hours. Like, what are you going to do? And so all of a sudden you're like, you have so much time, right? I'm doing the math. I got 123 free hours. I don't really have to study now because I can certainly study later. Yep. But when you have a job and you have to show up somewhere and you have some responsibilities, it kind of pivots on that, doesn't it?
For sure.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about right in that space is if we go back to the back side of the pyramid, right? So we look at the front side of the pyramid, which the way I interpret it is like life comes at us, right? Your experiences came at you as white light. And it was really up to you to determine like, what does this mean? Right? So you have a set of beliefs, and a belief that you had going into it was, I'm capable. I could read in kindergarten, right? I was the guy that I can do this. I've done a lot of different stuff. So you had a strong beliefs, but you also, in the moment, we always have an opportunity to reframe things. And that's really what the back part of it is about, like being present so that you can interpret your life in a way that gives you power. And instead of, even though you did have the why me, you also pivoted off of, okay, I can't stay there. Because if I stay there, nothing's good. Like, why questions just loop us, right? Why is this happening? Because you're a loser and you deserve it, right? But if you're able to look at it and say, okay, how do I take this circumstance and from this position, how can I look at this differently? So I get a better outcome. So I get something I'm really excited about. Mm-hmm. So can you think back into like that situation and like, were there certain things or times when you just kind of like really dug in and said, you know what, there's a different way of looking at this?
Yeah. You know, I wish I knew you back then, John. And I wish I had the presence and the awareness and the emotional intelligence to work through that situation as smartly as possible. And, unfortunately, I didn't have any mentors and I didn't have any, smart guys like you to kind of walk me through that journey. So I feel like I was very unaware. I mean, I know that I was very unaware to a lot of the things you just mentioned. Very unaware that presence even existed, that perspective was even a thing, that consciousness was a thing. I had no idea that, I can change my thought patterns and things like that, right? I had no idea how to regulate my emotions at all. And look, I made a lot of mistakes. We're talking about a lot of the wins and we're talking about all the challenges I face, but I've made a laundry list of terrible decisions even after that moment, right? For sure. Right. So, and I continue to make poor decisions recently, right? And everything's a learning experience. So I wish I had those tools that you mentioned. And
I wish I had them too.
I'm looking here at this picture of the Prism of Perspective, and I wish I knew what these things were back then, but I can definitely see how beneficial this can be to a lot of people and how presence, beliefs, energy can really affect the way you move forward in life, right? This is a tool to leverage. It's a tool to take advantage of. And, it really comes down to our thoughts. It comes down to our presence and our awareness and our consciousness. And, it's been a battle, but like we were talking about before we walked in this room and into the studio about how, look, we're humble. We have humility. We're going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to grow no matter what. And it's conversations like these, and for other people that are listening to this conversation, like it's conversations like these that make us better, that make us sharper, make us stronger. Right.
It's great to surround yourself with people that are willing to not know, right? And sit kind of in that space of uncertainty and like, hey, let me look at this a little differently, right? That's to me, you mentioned your mistakes. I made, a ton of them. For those of you who are unfamiliar, when I was Zach's age that we're making reference to, I was alcoholic at college, right? So I was blackout drunk fairly consistently, not having a real good focus. And fortunately, I got exposed to some of this type of information kind of accidentally because I had to get a job to support myself. And I happened to work for a guy that was really into this, Joe Cirilli, who runs Gainesville Health and Fitness Center, owns Gainesville Health and Fitness Center, which is a great, a world-renowned health club. And inside there, I got exposed to ideas, like you said, like ideas that never crossed my mind, like that I had, wow, I have choices in this, really like, this isn't really just dictated by the circumstances I get choices in how to do this, and again, 30 years later, 40 years later, I'm still working it out. But the fun thing is working it out and recognizing that, as you say in your book a lot, it's about the journey. It's not just about like this one destination or this one point and this checkpoint, but it's about how do we use the tools so we can expand our capacity and continue to increase the amount of contribution that we can give in a joyful way, because that feels awesome, right? It feels great to continue to grow and develop and to be dynamic and to know like whatever I am today, it's just a mile marker on a journey to some other really cool place. Mm-hmm. And so as we go on that journey, it's really fun to have great new friends and I'm really excited about having you on board with that. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about, because you do such a great job with it and you really do a really good job speaking about a lot of this in your book, is that energy piece. And I call it energy, but the way I look at it is your beliefs are kind of like things you've built, right? You've built your belief systems, whether society gave them to you, your parents gave them to you, you reinterpreted, but you have a set of beliefs about who you are, how you show up, what's going to be. And then that kind of acts as an identity belief, which is like a thermostat that tells you, okay, when I start acting outside of this, I need to behave differently. And then we have the universal ones, the global ones about how the world shows up. The energy is kind of like what brightens or dampens the light. Mm-hmm. And those are really the habits we have. Mm-hmm. And I break it down to nutrition, exercise, positive psychology or mindset, and then flow. And you do a really good job of this. Have you always done a really good job with your habits, or is it something you've evolved with?
Great question. I wasn't aware of my habits until I was 24, 25 years old. It wasn't until I picked up the book Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Yep.
And I started to understand the power of the compound effect of doing one extra rep in the gym, putting $100 a week in my Roth IRA, doing all these things that still, honestly, to this day, I still feel like I have not gone exponential and parabolic yet. Even though I've seen a lot of growth in my IRA and I've seen a lot of growth in my fitness. I've done 3 full Ironmans in the last 2 years. So like, I still feel like I haven't really got the catalyst or gotten the energy, like you mentioned, from the compound effect. But when it comes to habits, I've really just altered my life a lot. It started with waking up at 4:30 in the morning, reading 10 pages a day. I fast for 16 hours a day, which started pretty recently. And we were talking about networking. I try to reach out to 50 people every single day through social media just to introduce myself, ask them how I can help them and bring them value. But evaluating our habits is definitely extremely important. And I'm still continuing to try to refine our habits today. I use actually a Google spreadsheet and I call it my habit tracker. I purchased it on Instagram from someone who was selling it for $10. It's worth way more than $10. And I track pretty much everything I do, from writing one personal note card every single day to a friend, family member, or client, the 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, reading 10 pages, getting out of bed before 5 a.m., and there's a laundry list of them there. And they've been extremely influential and beneficial to me. And, good habits and bad habits. There's a lot of bad habits that I'm trying to destroy as well. Like I bite my nails and my nails look awful. And that's a habit that's been really, really hard to break. But yeah, habits are so important. I can definitely see how you bridge that gap between habits and energy. So
yeah. And the other thing, like you go back to Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect. And I remember being young and kind of sitting in life and feeling like, okay, I'm not where I want to be, and feeling like there had to be this monumental thing, right? There was going to be this like big freaking pivot. I'm going to do this thing and boom, everything's going to be different. And I wasted a fair amount of time like looking for that thing. And what I've come to know over time is like all of my enhancements in life are the compounding of tiny little, almost unnoticeable differences. I'm going to go back to something you mentioned earlier, and I'm going to say, you know what? I am actually, for a 60-year-old, quite fit and quite capable. And when right? So when I look at it and I'm like, okay, so let's like flexibility or balance or strength or what coordination, all those things I kind of have dialed in. And I look at it and I'm like, but there's never a day. There's 2 things that are true. There's never a day that it's like, holy shit, I'm so much better than I was yesterday. And there's also never a day where I'm not better than I was yesterday. in some way. I'm more flexible. I was able to get into a position I've never been into. And the compounding effect of that physically is like easy to look at, but it's in everything, right? It's in our ability to have emotional conversations. It's our ability to feel tension and continue to push forward, right? I do a lot of work in the area of flow. Flow is one of the energy things. And the core premise of flow is that there's this corridor where we function best, what they call the challenge skills balance, right? So the challenge that you're taking on is approximately what you're capable of, right? You don't want to go into overwhelm because then you're going to go into fight or flight. You're going to stop having access to all your capabilities, and you don't want to be bored because then you're just going to shut down. And so it's like thinking about that. And when you just kind of stay on that compound, right at that edge, everything expands. And it's the way I feel like it happens is you really don't even have to crush yourself, which I think is great, because as you approach your capabilities, your mind, your body, your emotions, everything goes, wow, we're kind of at the edge of our capabilities. We better build some more surplus just in case. And so it's kind of like as you're pushing against it, it's running away. And all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, wow, I can do some stuff I was never able to do before, in each of those areas, whether it's in business or it's in your relationships at home or parenting or whatever it happens to be. If you continue to stay focused and just kind of work at the edge, I don't even feel like I get outside of my comfort zone. I feel like I like to be at the edge of my comfort zone. Because if I'm outside my comfort zone, I'm starting to fight and flight. But if I'm at the edge of my comfort zone, I'm able to stay in that zone, stay fully focused, not be distracted, not be fearful. And that's how I found that I grow. How does that work with you? Does that resonate or?
100% it resonates. And I think your fitness level is a great example of the compound effect for sure. Like you haven't made massive strides forward, right? You've just made this small, inconsequent, you barely see the change, barely see the progress. But over time, those small wins consistently executed over a long period of time amount to massive results. And now you're in incredible shape, and you're only going to be in better shape as time goes on. You know what I mean? Because you're continuing to make progress forwd.
Yeah. So I feel like, hitting 60, I'm like, what? I don't know that many 60-year-olds that look at it, and I'm sure there's plenty of them, but I really think I'll be in better shape at 70. Now, I could be wrong. Right? There might be some time they're like, oh no, now's your aging time. But if I look at it compared to 50, I'm like, I'm in way better shape than I was in 50.
Right.
And so why does it stop? As long as you're pushing against it, sometime or another, we do age, we do, things happen. But if we continue to press, we should be able to get better at business. We should be able to get more dialed in. We were talking about niches, like more dialed into what is it that we do? Where's our zone of genius? And really understand that even better so that we're able to take our efforts and focus on those things that are fun for us, where we're naturally capable, and everything just kind of keeps expanding.
And that's flow.
That is being in flow.
The epitome of flow.
Right.
Like it's just seamless. You're not even trying, but you're so efficient. You're getting so much done. So actually, I got a question for you actually.
Yep.
So how can we use the compound effect to optimize our flow in business and work and relationships?
Great question. And so I think they tie together really nicely. And I say that because if you think about the corridor of challenge skills balance, that little corridor that you're at, then as you continue to press on that edge a little bit incrementally, then your skills grow and your challenge grows. And so you're continually getting better and you're continually staying in flow. And while we're on it, I'll just talk for a moment about it in case some people are unfamiliar. So flow is a state of consciousness that has been studied really since the beginning of times, really. They talk about it, the Stoics talk about some of it, but really William James gets deep into this state. A lot of people know what it is, runner's high, right? So you're all of a sudden you're kind of feel like you're at your edge, and then all of a sudden wow, no, this feels awesome. And so you can get that state lots of different ways. You can get it physically, you can get it by challenging yourself mentally, you can challenge yourself by diving into deep emotional conversations, but it really does require a few things. It requires that you're kind of at your edge. You have to have some struggle. But you can't be so much into struggle that you fall into overwhelm. So you want to the way I think about it is in a spinning class, for anyone who spins, if you get to the point in a spinning class where you're kind of pushing a little bit over the edge and then just tap back a tiny bit, then you'll notice that you're like, wow, I'm like 99.5% of where I was before, but this feels great and that felt bad. And so pay attention in your life to where that edge is. And so when you're doing your business work or you're doing, how many calls can I complete in this hour? You're going to find a number that feels really good for you. And most likely over time, it'll expand. Your ability to focus and hold concentration will expand. But when in this state, what they say, there's a thing they call STIR. It means selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness of environment. In other words, like you have all this incredible feedback. So what that means is that when you're inside the state of flow, what happens inside your brain, it's called transient hypofrontality, which basically means for a brief period of time, parts of your brain shut down so that more energy can go to the parts of the brain that are necessary to do the task at hand. And what shuts down is a lot of the distracting stuff. Like, how is Zach interpreting what I'm doing right now, right? I need to be in the conversation with Zach, not thinking about like what's Zach thinking about me in the conversation about Zach, right? Mm-hmm. I got to be here in the moment, not thinking like, I wonder how long I've been doing this. What is time? And so the networks, the brain networks that pay attention to that yourself and time disappear. And because there's a release of these neurochemicals that are peak performance neurochemicals. You get a flood of norepinephrine, you get dopamine, you get serotonin, you get oxytocin, you get anandamide. And essentially, if you think about that, it's like this super drug cocktail that enhances your ability to process information, to recognize patterns, to think creatively. Physically, it makes you stronger, better reaction. So essentially, you're endogenously, right? You're not taking anything. It's being created by you. But it's this peak performance chemical that feels freaking awesome and you perform at your best. And so you look at it and you go, okay, so why do I not want more of that, right? If I can feel awesome and do great work. And so then the great opportunity we have is looking at, okay, how do you get into flow? Mm-hmm. And fortunately, there's tons of research on it that has, here's the triggers, here's the blockers. And, so we can build our lives in ways that enable us to access flow and have high flow lifestyles. And having a high flow lifestyle, basically meaning you get into flow consistently, has a super high correlation with overall life satisfaction. So you say, okay, this is a worthwhile objective. I should probably learn this recipe, right? If you have like some food that's like amazing, right? You're like, oh, what's it? Can I get your recipe? Same thing's true for flow. Mm-hmm. I don't want to fall into it every once in a while and go, my God, it was incredible. I was in this one situation and felt amazing. And you're like, well, okay, how do you get back? I have no idea. Like, because we have the opportunity to know how to get back. And so that to me is one of the pieces of energy, because again, you have your habits of exercise, nutrition, mindset, really setting that. And then it's about scheduling your life so that you have these little periods of time where you're super focused on whatever it is you want to be paying attention to. Because at its core, flow is rapt attention. Basically, it means you're not thinking about anything else except the thing there, right? Actor and action merge. So you're bringing it all together into that pinpoint. And what we want to do is think about our lives in such a way that we're like, okay, let me build a bunch of this in intentionally. So instead of going through a life kind of linear, mediocre throughout the day, I'm going to really focus, recover, really focus, recover, really focus, recover. And that's how we perform our best and have the most fun.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something I really haven't tapped into is flow. And when you mentioned triggers and blockers, that's something I want to learn more about as well. So how I can trigger a state of flow and how I can block myself from not getting out of flow,
right?
I guess.
Right.
Interesting.
So let me ask you a question. What do you think? Because some of it's probably intuitive to you at this point because you've created a lot of flow. You've fallen into it probably a bunch, somewhat accidentally without the same level of intention I'm referencing. But what do you think is going on when you're in flow? What are some of the things you're paying attention to?
It's tough to be aware of the flow in the moment, but looking back on the day and saying, wow, I was definitely in flow. Like yesterday, for example, 4:15 alarm clock goes off, immediately out of bed. I'm at Lifetime Fitness by 4:45, immediately in the cold plunge. I ended up swimming a couple laps. From there, I was actually coaching a client that I'm coaching in person. Met him at 6 a.m., coached him for an hour, 7 a.m., go to the beach, ran 3.5 miles at the beach, came home at 8 a.m., made my celery juice, made some breakfast for my girlfriend. 8:30, I'm hitting the phones. Session at 10, session at 11 break the fast, 3 eggs, an avocado, some blueberries. So it's just kind of like the day is just on autopilot in a way.
But it's clearly scheduled, right? You didn't show up, you didn't wake up at 4:15 and go, I wonder what the heck I'm going to do.
Correct.
Right? And so one of the things that we know about flow is, I talked about the challenge, skills, balance, but what also you want to be looking at is really clear objectives and immediate feedback, right? So you can make adjustments. And so when you have your situation, you're like, okay, I know I've got 45 minutes between the time I wake up and the time I'm at Lifetime Fitness. Mm-hmm. There's a really clear feedback loop. And if you show up there at 5:15 instead of 5 o'clock, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm off pace. Mm-hmm. So you got that feedback. And so in that pace, even if what you were doing was taking a shower, brushing your teeth, etc., because there's an intentionality to it, you have the access to these flow states. And flow is not like I'm in it or I'm out of it, right? Sometimes you have major flow events where, 3, 4, 5 hours go by and it seems like 15 minutes and it's mind bending and you really are in this state of altered consciousness. And sometimes it's just like, wow, everything was really kind of going cool. So I'm guessing that the brush your teeth thing along those lines is more of everything felt good. I wasn't stressed. I was clear. I knew what I was doing. I was getting immediate feedback. I was looking at my clock, seeing how I'm doing. I'm right on pace. So I'm getting the feedback, and then you show up maybe when you're in the pool and you're swimming your laps or when you're running your 3.5 miles, you have a certain pace that you want to be getting and you're looking at you're getting your feedback and where's my heart rate. And so those are the types of things that get you in. Other things that get you in is changes in environment, awe, uncertainty, unpredictability. So sometimes you want to be looking at, can I change my environment? Like having a really high stakes conversation with somebody where you're really fully engaged, you have a commitment, you want to move something forward, you want to protect, but you don't know where where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. If you knew where it was going to go, it's kind of boring. But if you don't really know where it's going, you're going to push it a little bit and it's going to be interesting and entertaining and exciting. And that's going to pull your attention in. And that's what flow really is. Flow is rapt attention. And so you're trying to think about, how do I do that? Now, you talked about the different time frames. The thing that I want to have everybody else understand is that because of this neurochemistry, right? So a lot of times if we're not in a state of flow, if we're in a state of fight or flight, we have a lot of cortisol and adrenaline flowing, and that's kind of what we're trying to get rid of. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. You spoke about that really well in your book, right? And so what we want to do is realize that the neurochemistry that's going on, and also, again, that you did a great job with neuroelectricity, right? The congruence of the brainwaves. The way that this works is it is very energy intensive. And so you have to, I like to think of it like I'm driving a Tesla and I want to hit that insanity button. But when I do that, I use a lot of energy and I'm going to have to charge my car up more often than if I just kind of drove it around gently.
Right.
Well, if you're going to drive your life in insanity, right? Not over the edge, but right at the edge of what's capable. And you're like, wow, this is awesome. Then you're going to have to give yourself recovery.
Exactly.
So when you're talking about, I have a 10 o'clock, I have 11 o'clock, you want to think about, okay, I want to have 10 minutes where I can drop into some mindfulness. Mm-hmm. I can get my breath work back. And during that period of time, the neurochemistry that you were using up is filling back up again. Mm-hmm. And then you get to dive back in and have that full attention.
Exactly.
Right.
And first of all, thank you so much for the kind words about the book. I took a lot of what I learned from Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton about neuroplasticity and understanding brainwave states and things like that. And it's crazy that I didn't know these things existed until 5-6 years ago, but I don't understand it nearly as well as you understand it. And however, I've applied a lot of it to my life. And I do meditate religiously and habitually every single day. I practice transcendental meditation, which is quite popular. And, that helps me, like you said, rest and digest. And I don't know if this is hypocritical or whatnot, but I feel like when I get up early in the morning and I go to Lifetime and I'm listening to, a Dave Ramsey personal finance podcast or a Rich Roll podcast, and then I'm in the cold plunge, that to me, I still feel like I'm resting in a way. And in that moment, I am totally in flow state. And, but to answer your other question of, when is there a time where I identify myself in flow state? That right there to me is like the epitome of flow state. Like I'm getting so much done, but I'm enjoying it. I'm getting so much done and I'm pushing those walls. I'm getting so much done and it's effortless. Right. So, I want to double down on this stuff. Yeah. So I'm super excited to read your book, Prism of Perspective, and get involved in all the resources that you're going to be launching here shortly. So I can double down on all these things because it has made a massive impact on my life. And it's a lot of, I kind of say it's very similar to like spirituality, like being super present, being super conscious, like, and that's been, made all the difference.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm excited. I am excited about getting the book launched and having an opportunity to really impact a lot of lives, because what I do believe that Prism of Perspective brings is there's not really necessarily like, oh, wow. Like for instance, flow is a part of it. I didn't discover flow. I certainly am not the first person to talk about nutrition or exercise or vision, values, purpose, or anything along those lines. What I think it does is it gives you like a rack to hang these things on and to think about like, where am I thriving and how do I do that even better using these tools? And maybe like, wow, that didn't come out quite the way I wanted to. Did I, in presence, part of presence is really expanding the space between stimulus and response, right? So that we're not reactive, that we're not instinctive, but we're really responding based on our values and the outcomes we want to create. And that we're taking the time to think about, okay, let me add some vantage points. Let me look at this differently so I can then make the best choices moving forward. Sometimes we do a great job of that. And sometimes, I react and I'm like, really? Did I just yell at my daughter about that? Really?
Yeah.
Aren't I supposed to be a little more involved in that? But it's always going to be a process. And it's, it's kind of like the stock market in a way. Are we moving up over time? Sometimes we're going to have a drop and go, wow, I did not show up as my best self in that moment. But I want to look at my life and say, I'm going up, I'm growing, I'm expanding, I'm getting better. And one of the things that I am a really big advocate for is challenging the idea that we have our greatest joy in leisure. Because too often, like I remember growing up and there was these advertisements that were like, it's Miller time or weekends are made for Michelob or whatever it happens to be. And then I have nothing against the idea of like chilling, but thinking that is what your big thing is. You're putting everything off for some time where you're going to disengage from your life rather than thinking, I'm going to fully engage with my life. I'm going to experience it at the edge of my capability as much as I can, as deeply as I can, as richly as I can. That's where we're going to have our real joy. And from a societal perspective, we need one another to show up. There are some real challenges out there. And if we're not showing up our best, or even if we're just showing up as our best for ourselves without thinking about the contributions, like how do you use the skills, gifts, talents, and passions you have to actually make a difference? Not just to have some monk-like experience. And by the way, monks actually do a ton of really great stuff. People think they just sit in caves somewhere, right? They teach themselves to deepen and then they bring their deeper selves out into the world. That's what we want to be doing too. Maybe we're not sitting in a cave, but we're doing these energy practices of exercise, nutrition, mindset, getting enough sleep, thinking about building gratitude and compassion into our lives so that when we go out into the world, we're altering who we are for the better so that we can go make those contributions. At the outside of the backside of the prism, you really look at, the idea is that we live our lives anywhere from having like a victim experience where we feel like we live in a dangerous world, there's no resources, there's nothing we can do about it. And then maybe we start fighting our way through it. So we're fighters, but we still feel like, I got to win, I got to take you out. And gradually you start to get into like a negotiator. Okay, I don't have to be so violent, but I'm still going to think of myself first. Contributor starts thinking, I want to be a contribution, but we live in a scarce world. So contributors are funny because they're trying to be a contribution, but they're doing it from a place where they feel like they have to sacrifice themselves. And they're creating actually win-lose relationships, which ultimately tend to collapse upon themselves and drop them back down into victimhood. If you get up above that, you start to recognize, you know what, regardless of what the news is trying to tell me, we live in a relatively safe world versus any other time in the world. We live in an extremely safe world, especially most likely anyone that's listening to this and certainly us, right? So our life experience, we're very fortunate to be sitting in a pretty sweet, or like a Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I mean, like, it can't really be that tough. And then you think about, okay, so we have collaborators that are people that are thinking about how do we work together on this task? Partners are really thinking, how do we work together on this task and build our relationship in such a way that we now have another asset, not to manipulate, but to continue to contribute to one another. So we're expanding. And then the highest level of life experience is kind of that flow state. I call it co-creation, where you're in that space and you're really just trusting in the universe where I can give my best and make my greatest contribution without necessarily being concerned about what's coming, because I know it's coming, right? I'm not trying to manipulate a particular deal. I'm just like, if I continue to be a contribution and bring my gifts and talents to the world, one, I'm going to love the experience, and two, I'm going to be taken care of. Because that's kind of the way the universe works, right? And so again, going back to the prism of perspective, it's really like, how do your beliefs, your energy, and your presence give you an opportunity to elevate your life and come from that space that allows you to be wholeheartedly committed without holding back, because you don't really have the fear that if you're not self-defensive, that somebody's going to come take advantage of you, right? It's kind of like being able to lean in. So that's kind of the prism, and
love it.
Yeah. So
love it.
So yeah, thank you for that. So let's think about other situations. You had mentioned, for those of you who do not know, Zach was on Big Brother. What were the years? Was it 14?
Big Brother 16.
16. Okay.
It was back in 2014. I just graduated from the University of Florida, didn't have a job, and the timing really worked out well. I got cast to go on this TV show, showed up at the audition, got the job, I guess. For anyone that doesn't know what Big Brother is, it's a game show reality show on CBS hosted by Julie Chen Moonves. And it's 8 guys, 8 girls locked in a house, no phones, no communications, no TV, no newspaper, nothing to read, nothing to do. We just talk to each other, and we play competitions, physical competitions, mental competitions, endurance competitions. And then each and every single week, the house guests, which were called, vote one person out. Kind of like Survivor, which Survivor's obviously under that CBS affiliate network. And I was on the TV show, and I didn't really have a strategy going into the show because I never watched the show. And I just went in there to have fun. I had a great time, best summer of my life, and came off the show. And I think I know where you're going with this question. I came off the show with a little bit of popularity. I came off the show with Instagram followers, Twitter followers, people writing articles about me, people asking me to show up to places and pay me an appearance fee, and I was on top of the world. I thought I was famous. I thought I was never going to have to work again. I thought the money was going to continue to come in until the day I died just because I was on Big Brother. And super thankful for the opportunity and super grateful for the opportunity. And I made the most of it, and I proved how grateful I was if anybody that watched the show. However, it was bad as well because it had a severe impact, negative impact on my mental health. And I became an egotistical, narcissistic, pretentious douchebag, asshole, jerk to everybody I met because I thought I had more fame than everyone in the gym, and I thought I had more money than all my friends, and it led me to a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. And I spent every single dollar I had on the stupidest things, whether it was $400 tables at a club in Miami. I thought I could afford $400 nights at hotels. I was buying shoes that I didn't need. I was buying clothes that were too expensive and out of my budget. I bought a BMW cash, which was a terrible car because I had to repair it every 6 months. And that was expensive. It's like $2,000 just to pop the hood on a BMW to get it looked at. So
So this isn't a BMW commercial.
No, it's not. And but yeah, it was a very tough and very trying time in my life, and very ironic the circle of things of how I grew up very confident, had this innate ability to succeed. I get on the show, and that's when I thought, hey, I made it. I worked my ass off. I got straight A's through school, went to University of Florida, worked hard in college, became an entrepreneur, got cast on this TV show, and I killed the TV show. I was so funny and everyone likes me and people think I'm good looking and I'm funny. And, I created this and I deserve money now. I was deserving. I thought that
entitled, right?
Entitled. Yeah, exactly. That's the word I was looking for. I was entitled, and that was not the case.
So let's break that down, because I think what we're trying to do is really think about how these things really do come in. So you had a belief system that really changed, right? The one you came into the University of Florida with was more humble. Right?
Absolutely.
So it was humble.
100%.
You were looking at, okay, I have the capability, but you understood that you fit into this space, and it didn't seem like you saw yourself as this exceptional person that other people owed anything to. It was really like you needed to go do it. As you came off of the TV show, it seems like those belief systems that had really served you had been polluted in a way, right? Where instead of thinking I'm very capable, you were thinking I'm more capable than everyone else, rather than thinking we all deserve, I'm more deserving than everyone else.
Yeah.
And so beliefs impacted the way you behaved, right? So you had a set of beliefs that were now filtering all the information in the universe, and you were looking at it and stuff was coming through. Whereas in the past, you probably wouldn't have looked at the super expensive shoes or clothes or whatever, because it was there, but now all of a sudden your filter was like, that's something that aligns with my identity. I'm a guy that deserves this.
Right.
And so we start to see, we filter out everything that doesn't align with who we believe we are. But if we're not careful about the story we tell us about ourselves, we can then end up supporting something we don't really want to be. Right. And so it sounds like a little bit of that happened. And then drugs and alcohol. And I think you had shared with me that you kind of had a period of several years where you were depressed and anxious.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Coming off the show with a lot of attention and all positive. It was all positive attention. And then when the next season came around, no one cared about the cast members from Big Brother 16. They were looking at the cast members to BB 17. They were focused on the new season, the new show. So it happened very quickly where the well just kind of went dry and there was no more money on the calendar. And my manager that I was working with at the time was like, hey, Zach, you don't have any bookings, so I just want to let you know that not only that, but no one's even reaching out anymore. The email is even dry. Right. We're not even getting requests anymore. Because at one point it was like, all right, we got to filter out who's willing to pay the $2,000 for me to show up and who's not. Now we don't even have anyone reaching out.
Right.
So that's when I was like, oh wow, this is tough. And at that point I had squandered the $30,000 that I made on the show. I was 24, still 25 at this point, still living with my parents. I had no money. I had a BMW that I couldn't afford. And, I was like, wow, wait, where do I go from here? And at the time, I was also, for what it's worth, in a very toxic relationship with a girl. I was a very toxic relationship, and all we did
was some cause and effect, right? I mean, part of it is like the toxic relation was causing some problems, but also who you were was
100%.
You were dancing, right? I'm always like, you know what? If you're in a dance and you're foxtrotting, so was the other person, right?
I was attracting that for sure, and it was just like, I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to work out. I didn't want to put myself out there anymore. I didn't want to, work, and got extremely depressed. There's probably like a 4 or 5 month period where I just didn't really leave the house. And I was just like smoking a lot of marijuana in my bedroom, and my parents were like, Zach, you need to get your shit together. And also it was severely impacting my relationship with my parents, severely impacting my relationship with my friends. It was a terrible time in my life. This was probably, this was like March, April, May, June of 2015 was like spring into summer of 2015. And then later in 2015, I was like, all right, I got to get my shit together. I don't care where I work. I just need a job. And I ended up being just like a bag boy at a golf course. And that's where the pendulum really shifted for me. It was like, all right, here I am, I'm outside, I'm in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. I'm like around golf, which I loved at the time, still do. I don't play it as much, but I loved golf. And even though I'm not making a lot of money, I'm happy because I can play golf for free. And I started to really appreciate the things I had. And I think that mixed with a lot of the humility that I started to embody, like, hey, I thought I was going to be Rich Trevor. I thought I knew how to manage money, and I was like, nope, don't know how to manage money because you had 30 grand at 23 years old. Could have bought a rental property, could have invested in the market, could have did something with it. But instead I spent it on alcohol and tables and hotel rooms.
Right.
So I thought I could manage money, but no. I knew nothing about money.
There's no evidence of it, right?
No
like,
evidence.
Why do you believe that's true? I'm not really sure.
Right. So that was tough. And, then I just started just waking up a little earlier, reading 10 pages every single day. I started listening to some like inspirational personal growth, self-development YouTube videos and started learning about people that were like Darren Hardy, the compound effect.
So let me jump in here for just a second
Please.
to make this clear. So what I see happened was you had this belief system that changed. And then as you came out of it, your practices disappeared. And so the two things spiraled together, right? We say we spiral up, we spiral down.
The perfect storm.
Right? And so all of a sudden you have this beliefs that's not really serving you. And then all of a sudden you get, punched in the gut. But what happens instead of saying, I'm resilient, I'm capable, you start to question yourself. And then when you're questioning yourself, you walk away from the very things that would help you get back.
Right.
Fortunately you were capable of moving around and it didn't last. But it was enough to wake you up, right?
Exactly.
Tell you, okay, I need to head in another direction.
Exactly. And then, you just start stacking small wins. Right. Where I was like, oh, I'm starting to feel better. I just went, 2 full days without smoking marijuana. I just finished a book. I haven't read a book since I was in high school.
Right.
And that gives you more confidence. And those were kind of like the bricks, the foundation of like building the house I'm continuing to build today.
Right.
And then just continuing to stack these bricks. It's the 1%.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Just a little bit at a time.
Yeah. But, looking back on everything, I do cringe. When I think about things I did and things I post on the internet and stuff like that and have a lot of regrets for sure. But it made me who I am today.
Yep.
It made me who I am today, and I'm weirdly thankful that I went through that very trying time because I don't see it ever getting that hard again because I have the tools and I have the resources and I have the people in my life that are going to build me up, that are going to support me no matter what I do. So,
right. Like you said, the meditation and the things like that you're doing, you're not going to allow yourself to slip that way.
Exactly.
But anyway, I am just so grateful for you taking the time out
Thank
to
you.
spend time with me. I as I mentioned, I've just really enjoyed your energy always. And this
Appreciate
has been
that.
every bit as much fun as I anticipated it to be. Hope others found it helpful. Again, Zach Rance and his book is Live Better Now. And if you get a chance to check him out, really great stuff. And we'll do this again.
Thank you, man, John. It was a pleasure. I had a great time. I'm going to be seeing you continuously at the gym. And thanks again.